And I'll ask the individual members of the Charter Commission to identify themselves, starting with Mr. Fisher.
Dick Fisher.
Arlen Sturgeluski.
Jim Parsons. Frank Reed. Fred Chai.
Joe Josephson.
Harry Pullman.
And,
Lisa Parker.
There she is. Parker. We would like to try to have everybody be heard. We appreciate it if you would identify yourself when you speak, and that you would also identify the section of the charter if you're speaking directly to some section of the charter, so that we may follow you with ease. Others may follow you. We will not limit time unless it appears necessary to do so. We will allow everybody to speak. We will open the public hearing. We would like to recognize the fact that many of you have been here before. I'd like to give those who haven't a first opportunity. And we ask, is there anybody in the audience who would like to be heard this time who hasn't been heard before? Okay, then. All right, that's one here. Thank you. Would you think you could start then?
My name is Alan Latham. I'm the mayor of the city of Glenalp. And I came this evening specifically to make some general comments. One, to thank you and also applaud you for being one of the few local entities that has recognized the existence of Glenalp, and to bring to your attention that Glenalp is an incorporated city of second class that has two primary functions. One, to identify the status of the road that leads to the city of Glenalp, and two, to assure that that road is in a navigable condition year-round. We have a modest revenue of $16,000 a year, and we have so far had modest expenses, i.e. maintaining that road, $16,000 of plus or minus a few dollars a year. I think what the inhabitants of the city of Glenalp and the council of the city want to assure is that we will continue to get the type of road maintenance which we have provided for ourselves. We now obtain state revenue sharing for the road, 7.65 miles of road. We obtain state revenue sharing of some $11,500 a year, which of course constitutes the bulk of our revenue. We want to be sure that this state revenue sharing is not diverted and remains at least within the service area of the city of Glenalp. We also have the one other problem, which I said was identifying the status of the road to Upper Glenalp. You may know or may not know that that road has been in question for many, many years. At this point, the status of the road, whether it is a private road or whether it is a public road, is still in question, and is right now before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. No one knows exactly how what that outcome will be, but we're pretty certain that it will be considered a public road. Certainly, it services the park, and far more people travel that road than just the residents of the city or the private property owners there. As a whole, the council of the city of Glenalp subscribes to the concept of unification, and we would champion it for it.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lanham, you don't feel in any way that the charter would impact the court case. Your basic thing that you would be looking for is some assurance as far as the road.
Certainly, I'm not convinced that the unification would impact the court case in any way whatsoever. What I'm most desirous of is that the revenues are sufficient to maintain the roads. We're a developing city. We only have, I would suspect, some 80 residents, 48 of whom are registered voters. But it is growing. Actually, it's growing rather rapidly on a ratio basis. If you were to look at it, we increased by some 20% last year. I suspect we'll do the same this year.
Okay.
Are there any questions of Mr. Latham from the commission?
Chairman, I think that quite probably that as a service area they would get the remuneration back to them the same as they have as the city, because the overall municipality would get it in relation to the number of miles of roads that they have. So I don't see where they would be impacted in their use. It might be of interest to the group that Ben out receives more revenue sharing per citizen than any other single area borough.
Well, I should also note that we do levy a 5 mil property tax within the city, which constitutes about another $5,000 worth of revenue per year, which makes up our cost of maintaining the road.
They also pay the highest tax number anywhere in the borough, which
You pay full borough taxes.
per person. That is per person.
Per person. Holmes? One more charter commissioner. Did you have anything else to ask, Mr. Latham? Any other questions? Mr. Parsons?
Al, you don't really see that the charter is going to change your status with that concern answered. Except you won't be a city anymore.
We won't be a city anymore. However, the what do you call it, community councils, if they exist and have the type of voice which is indicated within this charter draft, I feel that the needs and the concerns of the city will be well articulated.
Mr. Shaw?
Are you satisfied with multi-member representation?
I'll have to admit that the council itself hasn't addressed that question, and I myself am, but I can't speak for that.
Are there any other questions, Mr. Latham? If not, well, thank you for being here.
It's nice to find one city outside of Anchorage that endorses
Appreciate your taking the time. You wanted to speak?
Yes.
Would you?
I'm June Dirk, and I've been a resident of Anchorage for 23 years. And for the last 3 years, I have been very actively involved in schools in the Anchorage area. And I will present you with a little neighborhood survey which we have done in the last 3 days regarding the qualifications and the term of office as it is now written in the charter. This neighborhood survey, I'll read it to you. This is a neighborhood survey. conducted during a 2-day period regarding the voters' feelings on dissolving the present school board. The undersigned feel that the existing school board should be allowed to fulfill their elected terms. And we have selected 75 names for this, your information today.
Thank you very much.
Right, this is in different areas of town throughout the city.
That's 75 in favor.
Right.
Of not dissolving
Of
it.
not dissolving,
Yeah.
keeping the existing school board.
Rewarded. In other words,
Are you aware that we probably will make a change in the first draft wording of
I
that?
heard that, but we weren't able to get to
That was one Anchorage Times editorial that we seem to agree with.
Right, very good.
Mr. Chairman, yes, I know these two ladies have been very active in matters related to the schools, people for better schools, I believe. Is that correct? And I'm wondering, did you find general favor with the an understanding of the rest of the provision having to do with education?
Yes.
Your only concern then really is in the election, and you do favor the at-large election of school board.
Mr. Chairman.
yes, Mr. Joseph.
Well, what is the basis for the concern in as much as the incumbents could stand for election and if others feel as you do would be returned if they desire to stand for election and have that support?
We feel in watching these elections take place and being very close, keeping a very close eye on them, that we would like to see a continuance of the at-large, people running at-large. And in order for candidates to run at-large, as you probably all know, it's a very demanding, expensive thing because they're covering the whole city where your rural people are covering only their district. And we feel that it takes, because there's such a tremendous budget and so many people involved in the school system, that it takes each individual candidate to give us time to get familiar enough with the business at hand that to flush the whole plate and have to rerun, you're really possibly asking for a situation where possibly the people that came back in would be a completely new slate, which, as you probably know, in dealing with business, you need to have somebody on that board that is cognizant of the things that have gone on prior to this. Like to be replaced as they're being replaced. And we might add that we are certainly not in agreement with all of our school board members, as they said, but we feel that they do represent varied interests in the community, and it is a good policy as it
is. At least one person last night suggested that we still have at-large seats, but they be designated seats, as a former charter proposed as well. That is that you run for seat A through F.
When this came up before, as I recall, this last year, something was said about this, and it was proposed. And the one thing that we feel would possibly harm the situation is that when you're running against a person, so many times personalities become the primary issue rather than the job at hand. And as you know, in public office, many times it can be very detrimental.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on the commission? Not. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate your concern and the time you've taken to do a survey. Is there any? Yes, my name is
took a start. Many of you know me in another capacity than as an individual, and for that reason I hesitated to talk to you prior to this time. But tonight I want to speak as an individual and not as the husband of the President of the League of Women Voters.
However.
Join the crowd.
I've worked in a number of municipalities. One of them, a strong council, weak mayor form with 15 councilmen elected individually from districts, and 4 of them council manager plan elected at large, and one of them a strong mayor with an appointed administrator form. I'm familiar with all of these plans and what the effects and the merits and demerits of them are. And I wrote my doctoral dissertation on local government representation. In addition to that, I was the chairman of the area-wide unification committee in Juneau when we passed the charter down there. One of the things that I've always felt over the years is that the structure of the government is extremely important as far as allowing the will of the people to be heard, particularly the structure of the governing body. And I've always, for that reason, advocated single-member districts. And you may remember some of the articles that have appeared in the news under the Alaska Forum that I wrote on single-member districts. So I do favor the single-member districts because I think they allow a better representation of the electorate. Because the tendency when you have larger districts, such as either at-large or multi-member districts, is that the minorities, and these can be minorities of any type, whether they're sex, color, race, religion, or anything else, tend to be obliterated by the majority in the election of the people from that area. The advantage, of course, to a multi-member district is that you may get to vote for somebody at every election, and I think that's a positive advantage. Of course, that's not the only advantage, and I would remark that even though the borough at this time has the multi-member districts, that the borough had adopted the 11 single-member districts, which would have gone into effect except for the loss of Eagle River, which meant that the assembly was then malapportioned and they had to reapportion. One thing that I also feel very strongly on is the advantage of runoff elections. And I think for the same reason that a runoff election allows a better way to get the real will of the people, whereas if you don't have runoff elections, you can have somebody elected with 20-25% of the vote. And of course, one of the things that a politician can do if you don't have a runoff election is to get somebody to run that is similar to his opponent and thereby split the opponent's vote, so that the type of person that the majority of the voters would want to put into office is not the one that's elected. And for whether it's for good or ill, and I do not attempt to make that distinction for obvious reasons, in the 3 runoff elections that the borough has had, the person that won in all 3 of the cases was the person that came in second in the general election. So that indicates that perhaps that person didn't represent the desires of the majority of the electorate, as far as the fact that there's a low turnout in the runoff elections. I don't think that that's as crucial an item as some people think, because I think that the people that are elected people that don't tend to mirror the total electorate. Or you could say that another way, and you could say that the people that that vote are those that are most vitally concerned, and perhaps there's a positive virtue in having the people that are most vitally concerned determine the outcome of the election rather than people that just go to the polls and punch a name without knowing anything about it. Specifically, in relation to the charter on page 3A, you have a couple of things that I'd like to comment on. The first two things I want to comment on are in relation to the runoff election. Now, in Article 4, Mayor, Section A, I would suggest that you say the mayor is elected at large by majority vote. Now, some people that want to get rid of one-off elections admit that it's desirable that the mayor have a runoff election because of the importance of this position and because of the effect it can have of splintering the electorate and electing somebody that the majority of the voters don't want to elect. And so they would say, well, we ought to get rid of the runoff elections for the assembly, but they admit that there is desirable to have the runoff election for the mayor. So if you put it in the charter at that point that it was by majority vote, then it would have to be a runoff election for the mayor. The charter is silent on whether there should be runoff elections for the other positions, and presumably the Assembly would make that decision. Now, there is one thing that I very much object to in the charter, and that is on page 6A, section 16.02B, which is the transitional section on the first election. And it says there that about 6 lines down, there shall be no runoff with respect to any office. Now, I for the life of me can't understand why that is so important. And particularly, I think it is a very bad thing for the reason that this applies to the election of the mayor, and if the charter is approved in August, and if the first mayor is elected in October, this of course will be an extremely important election for the new government. And I think that if there's any election ever for the unified government where there should be a runoff, it would be in this case. So I would think that it's very important that that section be deleted, saying that there shall be no runoff with respect to any office. Now, another thing that I had a question on was on section 16.06C, and this is kind of a picky procedural question, but I can't understand that date, December 31st, 1976. I may not understand what you're trying to do here, but it seems to me that that should be 1975.
Well, Doug, where are you again, please?
16.06C. I talked about a financial report. I assume you're talking about a budget because it couldn't really be an audit because it calls for it being made prior to the end of the fiscal year. And if it's a budget, in reading through that whole section, I would have to assume that should be 1975 instead of 1976. But I may be wrong. I may not be understanding what you're trying to say there.
And pointed out it's
but that's a very picky thing, and the other things I mentioned are much more important. I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Chairman. I'd be interested in, if you could, kind of a brief comment. In the event the commission were to change and suggest the council manager form, what is your major criticism of that particular? I realize you prefer the other, but what are some of your concerns?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because I did want to comment on that I think that you compromised in that area fairly successfully in the sense that you have the manager ratified by the assembly. So what you have is you have a strong mayor, which I think is good, and then you have a manager who's appointed by the mayor but ratified by the assembly. So if a person doesn't like having a strong mayor, at least you've got that idea of having a manager ratified by the assembly. Now, the problem with a manager, and of course I've been a city manager in several cities, and I think there's a lot of advantages to the manager plan, and my views are completely divorced from the system that I happen to be working in at the present time. The disadvantage of the manager plan is I think that it's insulated from the people, and I think it's really a value in having the mayor elected and having the people be able to go to him. And I just had a call today or some woman that was extremely irate because she'd gotten a bill because she hadn't paid her sewer bill, and I won't go into details. Anyway, she called the mayor, and he wasn't there, so I had the joy of talking to her. But I think that's a positive virtue, and in the manager plan, so often the people are insulated from the administration, and the manager doesn't have the political accountability that the mayor does, and you could say, well, that really doesn't matter, because he's hired by the assembly and blah, blah, blah. But that's really important, and particularly as you get into a larger city, I think it's more and more important. And I've seen this in the city of San Diego, for instance. So I think it's fairly obvious that the mayor isn't going to be personally running the show. Number one, the charter provides that he has to have a manager. But I think he has the power, and he has no excuse for not being able to do something. So I think it's basically a function of size, and the larger the community gets, the more necessary it is that there be a strong mayor. And what the cutoff point is, whether it's 100,000, 500,000, the population, it's hard to say, but I think this community is large enough. And I would say also that, of course, the community has voted twice on whether to have a borough mayor or a borough manager, and they voted both times to have a borough mayor. But I think basically it's the accountability to the people, the person having the administrative power being accountable to the elected.
Thank you.
Right. Mr. Chai, do you have any comments on the community councils as we have written it into the charter?
I didn't go over that in minute detail. I don't have any comment. Either pro or con. I think it's a good concept as far as being in the charter. I don't think it absolutely has to be in the charter. I think it's probably desirable to have it in the charter. One of the things about community councils that's concerned me recently, and of course they've only gotten started recently, is that I think when the assembly set up the concept, they adopted a map which showed something like 15 areas, and what we're seeing as these councils get started is that they're smaller and smaller and smaller, and one of them had 44 homes in it, and they're being organized on a much smaller basis than I think the assembly intended, and I think that's kind of a bad thing, but it's pretty hard to control since the councils are supposed to come from the people rather than down from the government. I think they're a good thing, and there's some analogy, of course, between councils and what the state law provides for in service areas having boards of supervisors. The boards of supervisors concept hasn't been used too much. Of course, there is one out or two out in Eagle River. In other areas around the state, they haven't been used. But I think it is desirable to have that concept. As far as the particular wording in the charter, I can't say yes or no.
Mr. Chairman,
Very funny.
Doug, they've used the commissioners with road improvement districts in the Fairbanks borough. And they've got quite a number of commissioners with the services. Same as he has in the fire district.
Mr. Chairman, Mary, but they're doing that through service districts as opposed to community councils. And I think we need to do some work on that. And that's
Well,
what
a
they
community
may
council,
belong.
of course, would be a broader based thing, which is better. In other words, it's sort of a sub-assembly to an extent, whereas if you do it on a service area, particularly if it's just for a service like a road district, then I think it's less representative. It's just more to provide a service, but I think it's better to have something that's more of a general government type of thing, such as a community council would be.
Are there any other questions of Mr. Chair? Mr. Parsons?
Would you have any objection if there were opportunities written in to do both? That is, to have a service area with just limited powers kind of thing, and a service area who are indeed a sub-assembly, such as Eagle River, perhaps, or Girdwood.
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for being here and for giving us your opinions. Did you wish to talk?
Sir, I'm Mark Sollenberger. I'm a city employee, and I'm also president of the Anchorage Municipal Employees Association. For your information, the Anchorage Municipal Employees Association is one of 6 collective bargaining units with the city of Anchorage. Also, I believe there are 2 bargaining units in the borough, and combined with the school district, borough, and the city, 13 collective bargaining units. And I'd like to speak to section 1604B. I'd like to bring out 2 basic points as seen in section 1604B. The first point is in the first sentence, which basically states that current employees affected by unification of duplicative agencies of former governments are entitled to preference in other municipal employment in compatible capacities. There's quite a number of labor agreements between the city of Anchorage and the employees, and also in the borough. There are in these agreements pretty definite procedures of hiring preferences. Now, in our case, we are it's a company union where employees representing only employees working. However, in some of the other unions cases, there are hiring hall procedures, which I would suggest that you could address yourself a little bit more to as to who is entitled to preference and duplicated jobs. In our labor agreements, we do have a definite layoff procedure, and we do have a preference in who gets different jobs. And this could possibly connotate ours and other agreements. The second part of section 1604B apparently allows the adoption of administrative code. I personally feel, and a lot of us do, that the way it's written, the adoption of an administrative code could preempt this existing collective bargaining right. If this is the case, that it could preempt existing collective bargaining rights, and we feel it should be spelled out that way. Other than that, we would suggest that if you intend to maintain
collective bargaining rights the way they stand, that the pending adoption of the administrative code should be stricken to the charter. Also, I'd like to point out a problem that isn't even addressed in this, and that is now there is a potential of duplication of bargaining units in unified government. The borough has just organized a large general government unit, which the like employees in the city are covered predominantly by the AMEA and also the Joint Crafts Council. It is potential once we merge, labor agreements will overlap, like classifications will be sitting next to one another, people in like classifications will be sitting next to one another, and they will belong to different units doing the same thing. I would suggest you look into it, that the recourse would essentially be in our benefit, would be to recognize the senior bargaining unit in case of duplication of bargaining units. However, I feel that you should identify the problem of duplicated bargaining units in this charter, because it can cause a serious problem once unification is formed. Another thing I'd like to point out is, in my opinion, the benefit of the city and local government feel that it's best to collective bargain with professional administration. The reason is bargaining with professional administration, basically we're dealing with a man who's primarily interested in the corporate interests of the city and is not politically motivated in collective bargaining. From our experience, politics would interfere too much with Western administration. Fisher.
Mr. Sullenberger, we're very concerned about the employment. Is that correct, Sullenberger? Did I do that? The employees of both the city and the borough, and the school district as well. And we thought we addressed everything. And let me first ask you. If we struck pending the adoption of an administrative code, then that means that the existing collective bargaining agreements would continue on, and they may be, as you point out, may be in conflict. Well, I don't see how we could do that. Do you?
Sir, how are you going to administrate through a code against collective bargaining agreements? Well, how are you going to sort out a collective bargaining agreement to administrative code?
Well, I assume you'd have to do it by negotiation with the collective bargaining unit. I mean, that would become part of the code.
If I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is an administrative code would identify the bargaining unit with jurisdiction, the one that has the right to bargain.
Well, eventually it would by negotiation. But you see what I'm saying? If you didn't have that in there, then all of them would continue by fiat of the charter, and that just doesn't make any sense at all, does it?
Well, I would agree with you. But I don't feel that that is the answer. That connotates that through administrative code you can eliminate collective bargaining altogether.
No, I don't think that's our intention, and I don't think that's legally what it says.
That's not the intention, and I think it should be definitely clarified because that's what it connotates.
So we should say what? Our intention is not to do what? Explain. At this point, I'd like you to explain to us how we can handle the problem. You pointed out several problems here, and I'd like to know how to handle them.
Dick, maybe rather than try to settle this at this point, perhaps you would be willing to prepare what you believe would be right.
That's our problem.
Give it. Mrs. Ronnie?
Mr. Chairman, I think that both the city and the borough have ordinances that prescribe procedures whereby groups of employees are recognized as bargaining units. At least the borough does. And the proposal is that all of the ordinances of both will be taken, and the mayor will choose which one he wants to work with, and during a certain period of time, the new assembly will decide whether to accept that ordinance or whether to have a new one or whether to strike that one out.
Yes, ma'am.
And that would be at that point, at this point somewhere along the way.
Yes, ma'am.
There would have to be a way for the employees, like employees, to come up with either one or the other bargaining unit or a new bargaining unit under some sort of procedures. Now, this has been spoken to by the charter.
Mr. Chairman.
I personally feel that the language doesn't identify the problem accurately, and I feel that the intent that Mr. Ronnie is saying is basically intent behind the language. It's going to cause a great deal of serious problems in labor management.
Well, Commissioner, could we leave it that way? Then you will get back to us with a definite written proposal as to the way this should read, because our aim is to get along and to mesh these things as best we can and as easily as possible. And I thought we'd done that, and your testimony surprised me a little. So if you would be so kind, we can address that when we go back into our deliberations. And we appreciate it. Arlen?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Stahlberger, I talked to Art Forrester today, the firefighters union on the street corner, and expressed some concern also. I'm wondering, when you talk, how many groups are there, and do you have anything in common with the various bargaining units, for instance, such as an attorney or anyone? Can you speak, say, for all bargaining units and their particular concerns? How do we get down to the problem for everybody? You can handle a part of it. All right. Could you make a suggestion to us of some of the other people, perhaps, that should be contacted?
I really would appreciate it. If you have any questions for them, I can put that.
Okay, we have an attorney, and I'm not so sure, but what it might not be wise if we can have the appropriate people to have him perhaps meet with some of these people. But we'd like to have your suggestions as to who those people might be.
Mr. Chai?
The only question I wanted to put out in this writing that you have, remember that the charter is a conceptual document. It's a constitution. So it is not legislating between what is right and what is wrong in labor agreements. So bear that in mind in whatever you're writing.
The point I would like to bring out is, Mr. Fisher said, you have identified that the labor relations problem, local government, and Anchorage is a very complex system, and it should be pretty accurately identified, the concept. If you have an opinion on what you feel it should be outlined so everybody understands what it is. Don't feel this law.
Good. Are there any other questions from the commission on Mr. Stahlberger? Mr. Peck?
Yeah, I wanted to speak to something you may have covered, and maybe you can't. But many times in my 1 year on the city council, I saw times when it would be a great advantage to retrieve the magistrates and judges under this new government, I think it would work better because you could screen a lot of stuff out before it got to the higher courts, and the justice would move a little faster and a lot better. I think that was a mistake to put the magistrates and city judges under the state system. I really believe it was. I saw many times on the city council we'd have been glad to have them back. So I don't know whether you addressed to that or not, or whether you can.
I couldn't tell you that either, Leonard. That's something we would have to look into, and I can't tell you offhand.
Mr. Spencer,
maybe Mr. Joseph.
Mr. Spencer can speak to that best.
Under the Constitution, Article 22, involving the court system statutes, we have what's known as the Unified Court System in Alaska. The city, for many years, until January of this year, has had a court, although since statehood, we've had sometimes what's known as a rented judge from the state court system. As of right now, the city has merged its court functions with that of the Alaska state court system. However, the concept of judicial services has been determined by the Supreme Court in 3 cases, the last of which was the Supreme Court versus the City of Anchorage, which they heard after they sued us on appeal, and rendered its opinion that, in fact, it was a unified court system and we had to pay for our rented judges and other things that were provided for us. So, Mr. Peck's question, it's, according to our Supreme Court, unconstitutional to do that. Although I agree with him, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. Thank you, Mr. Beck.
And thank you very much for being here, and we will look forward to seeing what you can produce for us. We don't guarantee we'll do that, but it will be considered, and we'll appreciate what you can give us in the way of information.
She was here before I was. I can talk about girls. What is
Mr. Chairman, I would just, I have 4 points I wish to...
Would you identify yourself,
speak to, yes. My name is Joan Hurst, and I live at 1610 Wolverine Street in Katy Lane. And I've been a citizen of Anchorage for 15 years. I noticed the points I wish to speak to are Article 8, the comprehensive plan. I certainly would be in favor of there being the comprehensive plan, and my concern is that there would be a mechanism to take the ideas expressed in the comprehensive plan and see that they come to light, so that they're not lost in philosophic statements and broad ideas. And I would like to suggest that 2 ways that might happen is that the mayor, as it's noted in Article 10, when you speak about the 6-year plan for capital improvements and so on, that plan, as it is drafted, would go to the perhaps to the Planning and Zoning Commission for approval, and then to the Assembly. And that I would also suggest that the Planning and Zoning Commission be empowered or have the ordinances or whatever is required that dovetail with the principles of the comprehensive plan, so that any broad plans that come to the Planning and Zoning Commission and to the Assembly have the possibility of being matched up against the principles of the comprehensive plan. I don't see anywhere in this whole thing where that gap is closed. And the ideas are so fine in the comprehensive plan that I think attention needs to be paid as to how they are really going to come to life, so that the good thoughts there can really happen in Anchorage and not be lost was a gap between those two layers of activity. Then the one other idea is in regard to Section 9, I believe, on the school board. I would like to speak for the idea, perhaps, of establishing seats A through F on the school board so that a person could run against a particular person on the school board, and the ideas wouldn't be lost in a bunch of fuzzy rhetoric and there are dozens of candidates whose ideas are ill-defined and no one knows what anyone thinks. And I feel that in a free-for-all kind of school board election, that it's simply a matter of popularity or name identification more than it is a matter of skill or competency or addressing a particular philosophy of education or any particular ideas. And I think for the general public it would be more distinct if a person could zero in on a particular seat, express their ideas as opposed to the present incumbent, and I think the public would be better served by having this definition more clear than it is at the present time.
Are there any questions of Mrs. Hurst?
Your point, I think, is that if in that large race, the challenger cannot focus in upon any particular incumbent's voting record.
His energies are just dissipated all over the place, and no one's ideas are very clear.
We had that in the legislature when 14 people ran at large, and it was the legislator was completely insulated from accountability, I thought, because of that. I never exercised that insulation, but
they did, but not you,
others did, yes. Others people.
Watch him.
Are there other questions from the commission of Mr. Hurst? All right. Did you have anything further, Mr. Hurst?
I think that's what I'd like to say.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and thank you for expressing yourself.
I have prepared my testimony in written form for you to read if you'd like. Cover that testimony with you.
Is this John or the city council?
This is John Spencer, resident of the city of Anchorage, soon to be a resident of the greater Anchorage area borough outside the city. Jen started digging on my new house tomorrow morning, which is in the borough. All these services. I'd like to take first the opportunity to thank you for your letter that you sent me after my initial input to the charter, signed by Mr. Reed some days ago. Secondly, I want to make it absolutely clear that I do favor unification of some sort or another, whatever type it comes out to be, where we can get a single kind of government for the metropolitan area of Anchorage. I think this is period. Frankly, the city attorney started this some time ago before your election, hopefully to engender some support. If you look in the courthouse, you'll see a sign that says City and Borough of Anchorage Prosecutor's Office, which we operate. I thought that might be some incentive to get on with the program. Secondly, let me advise you that I'm testifying this evening as John Spencer, private individual, property owner of Inside and Outside, and Matsu and other places, but not necessarily as my role as city attorney, although many of my comments are derived simply because of the kind of job that I do, and that is as a city attorney. My area of concern in the charter deals specifically with the handling of the utilities, okay, preferentially with the type of government organization that you anticipate you might. Philosophically, I am opposed to the way that you handle utilities in the charter. Now, I realize probably as much as anyone or more than most of the complexity of the utilities and their operation. As a matter of fact, in the last month, I think I have been in the Public Utility Commission and hearings with various sources against Mr. Shai's ex-corporation there.
Thank you.
Still raising a retirement check, but fighting with them on many days and the gas company and others simply in the utility arena. It's a complex area, and of course I'm sure you're well aware of that. I'm not too sure that every local government official is always aware of the complexities of operating the utility. Your basic theme of the charter, which I've heard Mr. Shai say many times and others, of keeping it simple, or a constitutional concept, transcends into the handling of these utilities, I think, adversely. I think that you need to spell out more succinctly how you want to handle the utilities in your charter. Simple statement that the utilities will be operated in a business-like manner. You don't really have a choice in the accounting system that you're going to use for the utilities because the Public Utility Commission has already set that out in the rules and regulations. So the operation and maintenance of the utility is basically what you've spoken to, and that's all. And the disposal of that utility. Now, what you have done is taken a concept that currently exists for those utilities of an extraordinary majority to dispose of a utility into a simple majority, and that simple majority, of course, does not even have to be a utility customer. ML&P, for example, could be sold under your current charter without having one single customer of ML&P vote on the matter, or all the customers of ML&P vote against the matter. Now, so you would have two gas electric customers voting to sell ML&P to whom? Two gas electric. That is not necessarily good in my opinion. Secondly, you would have the Anchorage Water Utility ostensibly in the same situation. The Anchorage Water Utility, although its service is more percentage-wise than the Municipal Light and Power Department, you would still have a possibility, because of the poor voter turnouts that we normally have, of non-utility customers authorizing the sale of their utility, of the utility that serves them. Now, I just simply cannot agree with that philosophical concept. I think that people have a little different approach on that. Now, thirdly, I think you need to address more succinctly in the charter, and I must caution you, the constitutional concept of the charter is very fine. However, I have seen charters modified by courts. I have seen philosophical understandings which are expressed in simple language turned around because there's no legal impediment against that particular project by a city council or a borough assembly. Not only in this city, but one can read about them in any case book that we have. And that, in that particular area, Mr. Sullenberg points that out most distinctly. And there it says that your collective bargaining agreements will continue until you have an administrative code. Your retirement plans will continue until you have an administrative code. And as Ms. Croney says, the mayor will pick and choose which one he wants to work with, or the assembly will adopt. Now, in that case, there is absolutely no guarantee, because we don't know who's going to be on the assembly, of what's going to happen. And so I must caution you that although we get involved in the keep it simple attitude, or the basic philosophical concept of simplicity for sale's sake, a constitutional approach,
there is no guarantee to the people that what they have now or what they want may be carried out even by the first assembly that's elected. Now, for example, I've shown in my testimony here the area of bidding, for example. I don't know how many of you have ever seen the City Council respond to a bidding problem where we have T carriers. I'm sure Mr. Shai is very familiar with at least the term T carrier. And we have a group of 10 bidders come down to the City Council and try to educate them in 30 minutes on an adverse position of what a T carrier is and whose is best. As they walk away, I'm sure that the City Council must understand that a T carrier is some kind of a gentleman who carries around a big T instead of an electronic matching type of apparatus. But notwithstanding that, it is inherently unfair to approach a group of individuals who are not professional in that nature and try to sell them on that idea. And there's only one way to protect that, and that is to prescribe it. And for example, Tacoma has done that down there. They have a technical board that runs their utilities. Your assets and liabilities section is somewhat dictated by the statute itself. The statute says the assets and the liabilities will belong to the area government. The whole general government will end up owning the assets and liabilities. The Juneau faces problems. Their utilities. Those utilities are in fact a profit-making enterprise. They reduce the taxes of the city of Anchorage. Now, what happens instantly when you have unification and you have a transfer of assets and liabilities either by law under Title 29 or by the charter under your 1607, then you have the possibility or the potential tax benefits which have been generated heretofore by those utilities to the residents of the city of Anchorage, inuring to the benefit of an undisclosed group. Now, preferentially, it could go back to the city, but there's no guarantee to that, or it could go to the borough at large. So if you happen to be a municipal light and power customer and you pay your bill in the winter of, say, $50, in that $50, if you have a 10% rate of return, which it's never been, probably 2 or 3%, but if you did have a 10%, which would be a reasonable rate of return, which the Constitution of the state of Alaska allows that utility to earn, then of that $50, $5 of it would go to the general fund. Now, that general government could, under your current charter, if it wants to, expend that $5 for the people on the hillside who are not ML&P customers. So you, as an ML&P customer, would be subsidizing their taxes. Now, the other hand, Chugach Electric, who provides their electricity, is certainly not going to give me, a city resident, $5 worth of tax relief because somebody out there paid their bill. Now, that is inherently unfair in my position, as far as I am concerned. There is nothing to proscribe, notwithstanding the fact that the statute requires these utilities to become area-wide assets, as the profits or the benefits of those utilities inuring back to the rightful, in my opinion, which is a philosophical discussion, rightful owners of those utilities, and that would be the city residents or the city of Anchorage residents. Now, that's what Juneau has done, in essence, is provided for those profits to go back to the city of Juneau, rather than to be spread area-wide. And this is what, as I drafted before, I would envision this charter to do, at least until such time as the equity ratio of those utilities has been paid back, if you will, into this service area, which heretofore had been called the city. Now, feel that that is a good way to handle the utility problem. Secondly, you get into the problem on this because of the statutes. The statute says that the water, sewer, and road maintenances must remain within the service district which originated the theft. Well, I disagree the constitutionality of that. That's not for us to determine. And other buildings which may be downtown, which may fall within the purview of that concept. Now, one area referentially that I'd like to touch on briefly is that which Mr. Wyford talked to you about the other day, and that deals with the form of government. I have worked under two forms of government in my career. I've worked for the city, I think probably as long as any city attorney other than Carl Walter, or maybe Judge Fitzgerald. But notwithstanding that, I have seen how it operates. I've seen how it operates with a part-time mayor, with a full-time mayor. Of course, we've watched the Greater Anchorage area grow. I am philosophically opposed to the type of government you have in your charter. And the reason I am is not because I like George and the way we operate in the city, or I don't like Jack and the way they operate in the borough. Philosophically, what you have done, and I talked to Mr. Wyford about this before he testified, you have created a monster. You have created an insulated manager who doesn't have to talk to the public, ever. He can talk to a mayor if he wants to, or if the mayor wants him to. And he certainly never has to talk to the legislature or the assembly. He never even has to whisper to them. He can control 90% or more of the facts. And he can give this legislative body whatever he wants. He has no qualms in that regard, because they can't fire him. They can't say, Mr. Wyford, fly, or Mr. Wyford, win. Mr. Wyford can say, I don't want to talk to you, so bug up, which is his absolute right under the way this charter is written. Now, rightfully, he can be appointed subject to confirmation of the legislature, which is fine. I would assume that there are people that have been hired before that after they've been hired and we've really found out what they're like, we very much like to fire. But you can't fire it, not the legislature, only the mayor. Now, in the same kind of government, which I think puts the mayor in Mr. Wyford's terms stronger than the governor of the state of Alaska. He has more power than the governor has. You also end up with the kind of problem that we have seen with the turnover of personnel. That is, every time your mayor goes out, so do all of your department heads and all of the stability, unless you create a second layer of government, which is your career public service type employees. And once you do that, then you have a cabinet form of government. And with that cabinet form of government, at a local government level, without any political parties to keep people in check, because it has to, by law, be nonpartisan, then I think you have really created a monster. Now, if in fact you wanted to create council-manager form of government, which I certainly think would put the expertise in that area, then at least you have to have, I think, 6 votes of the 11 to fire the manager, but you can still fire him, so you can't fire him on a whim, but you can fire him if he's bad. You don't necessarily then have to fire all of his department heads, although as experience shows us, normally when we change the city manager, we find that a few department heads go down the line. But you don't have a wholesale turnover of your government, which leads to a tremendous amount of instability, because then you have every department head being a politician. And that's certainly one of the reasons unification, I think, is necessary, so you don't have to have 2 people in every job, one to be the politician and one to be the worker. So
with that, I think that we've gone along, as they say, and I'll say this basically, Darla, we've gone a long way, baby. This is basically, I think we're in the right direction. I was informed by Mr. Garnett, your attorney, that you're a very flexible group, and that you're looking really for answers rather than for anything else. So in that light and in that vein, I come to you and ask you to change some things. I think Mr. Solenberg has some very good points, because the way it's written now, I think can be interpreted to lose the total labor vote. And I certainly wouldn't want to see it go down because of that. As you saw my neighbor today on the street, he's very concerned about the retirement fund. There's nothing to guarantee his retirement fund. There's absolutely nothing to guarantee that in that charter. And he's very concerned, as are the police officers, very concerned that they can continue their retirement plan forever. What you've done is you simply said, it shall not diminish the benefits pending adoption of administrative code. Now, legally, I don't think you could ever diminish the benefits that they acquired until the date of unification or the adoption of administrative code. But at that point in time, whoever the new legislative body is could do whatever they want to. And there is no inherent right in Alaska for municipal governments to entertain any kind of labor negotiation. Simply say, as our labor negotiator says, what God giveth, God can taketh away. And in our latest negotiations that was used somewhat, and I'm sure will be used again, because there's nothing in the law that says that we have to have any kind of collective bargaining. We simply pass a law and say there will be no collective bargaining, and any employee who attempts to do so will be discharged instantly.
Mr. Chairman, John, you say that we're creating a monster, but I'm also concerned that if we have this, as a city resident, I should be outraged then that you as the city attorney are not protecting my interest on that $1 million of obligations that you're making us pay to the other monster that exists.
Mr. Parsons, to alleviate your anxieties in that regard, we have just finished, of course, the case before the PUC. A letter has been written to Mayor Roderick concerning that, and I have been instructed to proceed with the necessary legal action. So we will protect your $1,111,000.
Mr. Chairman.
Carlos, then you.
If I may, a few questions, John. On the sale of the utilities, would you have, and your point is well taken, has been pointed out to us by others, particularly just the majority, not the fact of possible receiving the service. Would you have a specific recommendation as to a percentage or some wording for that particular thing as to what would be required in the sale?
I started working on this last week because I thought my case with RCA would last one day.
Okay, could you do that and get that to Rick Garnett within, say, a week?
I told Rick I would try to get
Okay. I would point out regarding 407 boards and commissions, we did take cognizance of your earlier remarks regarding some type of utility board and felt that the wording in 407 was broad enough to allow for as far as we felt we could go. And if you take a look at that and see.
I have looked at that. The problem is there's no mandate. It just simply says that you can operate them any way you want to as long as you operate them as a business.
I see. Okay. Then,
unless you tie the two together, then we have no mandate.
Okay. I'm totally confused as to your remarks on the land trust fund and how we could possibly end up with a situation. There must be something before the borough that we're not perhaps aware of. I don't understand. I think that would be a very serious problem if what you say could be true, that we would end up in effect renting or leasing land that is owned by this new municipality. I don't see how that could happen, and what have I missed? Is that
There is a land trust ordinance which has been proposed by the mayor.
And it has not been passed.
It has not. There's public hearings, I understand, the first of the week. In that ordinance, it states that there is a land trust council made up of various departments. Somebody from Parks and Rec, the Department of Law, et cetera, et cetera. And in that land trust ordinance, it says land acquired after the date of the ordinance will be in the land trust fund. The land acquired prior to the date of the ordinance, which has not been specifically, and I assume they have some method by which they assign land to a particular department, Parks and Rec, so the city has something of that by resolution. But we don't, in the city, assign but very little bit of that land away. By City Hall Annex, City Hall, Merrill Field, the Park Strip, there's a half a block down where the McKay building is, and there's a bunch of land like that, Goose Lake and so forth, which is not assigned to a department. It's used by a department, but it's not assigned. And this ordinance says something to the effect that if the land has not been assigned to a department, or it's after acquired from the date of the ordinance, then that land is to be owned and managed by the land trust fund. And then you can rent that land from them at not less than 1% of the fair market value with rights of reappraisal. Now, if that would survive unification in that kind of a form, although the form itself would have to be changed because it talks about borough and service districts and so on and so forth. Remembering that service districts can't own anything. They can't take title to anything. Then you could find that the city would be paying the residents of the city service area, whatever you would call that, may be paying rent on some of the land they use. Now, the only way to stop that is to simply make a prescription. Land which is used within a service area prior to unification may be used by that service area after that without rent, or something like that. Mary?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Spencer's argument in relation to the GO bonds would worry me very greatly if I hadn't had it showed to me in the city budget book that there are more than enough offsetting assessments due to cover the GO bond. At the time at which the city retained the ownership of the sewer, as I understand it, the main reason for their wishing to retain the ownership was because there were more assessments due than there were bonded indebtedness. The borough at that time would have been perfectly happy to take over both the GO bond debt and the assessment due, but they wanted to retain the assessments that were due, and their bonded indebtedness was less, so that's the way they went, and it was their own choice. And I'm awfully happy that we have a financial consultant that's going to analyze the assessments due in relation to the bonded indebtedness for the Charter Commission, so that the public will get a true picture of this rather than the rather warped picture that I'm afraid that I would be left with if I didn't have that little tidbit of information already. The land trust ordinance that is only up, and I hope that John will come and testify before the Assembly in relation to it as to how it might work in case of unification, because I think it would have considerable effect as to whether or not the Assembly will adopt it. The retirement plans, both for the city employees in general, and for the borough employees in general, are with the state retirement plan. Now, I'm aware that some of the unions that work for the city belong to union retirement plans. But I don't believe anything that we have done in the charter necessarily guarantees that they will lose it. In fact, it does speak to it and say that they will retain it at least until the administrative code is adopted. And by the very fact that both the city and the borough ordinances are to be accepted, quote, equally in the former areas by the new government, and that whenever one or the other is eliminated, the proposed choice by the mayor will go before the assembly, and the assembly will have a chance to veto his choice of which ordinance will be used. And if they don't like either one, they have a chance at that time before it's adopted to change it. I think does give the public protection. I don't think that anybody is being proposed to be hurt in any retirement plan by the way the proposed charter is written.
Lisa asked Ms. Parker.
I had a question about 602, where we talk about action plan and ordinance, and we say that the Assembly can use ordinances to regulate the rate charged by a public utility. Now, the PUC always overrides the Alaska Public Utilities Commission. They always override this. When we say public utility, do we mean any utility, or does this mean municipal utilities, or all utilities within the area?
Okay, first of all, let me tell you that with this new government, it may well make an election that it will not be regulated by the PUC. It would have that absolute right at this time if, in fact, there is no competition between CEA and MLMP, which, according to the Attorney General's opinion, there would not be, or ATU and RCA, which I think, again, according to the Attorney General's opinion, would not be. So they would have a right to make that election to start with. They could just simply write a letter to the Public Utility Commission, which I would most avidly and strongly suggest they not do, and say we're not regulated anymore. That's a terrible kind of thing to happen, in my opinion, because of the interrelationship between the telephone system and what's known as the MTT network, which goes through RCA and the FCC. There's a lot of reasons I could tell you why you would never want to do that practically, but my particular opinion. But somebody has to approve a proposed rate, Lisa. That's one of the things. If you're going to have a rate, somebody has got to propose that rate. You can have a rate study or rate design study to come up with what you need from a requirement study, which are done by your experts and all that. Then that has to be presented to a governing body of some nature to determine what you are going to charge. Now, that, I think, if I read your charter, would be ostensibly what you're talking about. Now, that would be a rate subject to approval of the Public Utility Commission, because they're going to be the final word on it unless you appeal that to court as to what you may charge. But see, you may decide that you want to charge less and take a 5% rate of return rather than a 12% rate of return, and the Assembly would have that prerogative. May I, Mr. Fisher wanted to speak, and I hope to, it appears there are quite a number of people here, many of whom I think would desire to speak, and hope to keep it down to as short as we can now and go on with some of the others. Dick?
Well, very briefly, I don't want to speak. I want to just compliment Mr. Spencer on a well-prepared presentation, and I really appreciate it. You've addressed, particularly for a person of the legal discipline, you've addressed some very philosophical arguments in a very philosophical fashion. And we do have a problem with this assets and liabilities thing, and I will admit, for one, that in my deliberations, I took the simple approach, which you would, I think you agree we did. It isn't a simple problem, but you know that we can go into a lot deeper and get pretty complicated. And well, at any rate, I'd like to compliment you. And we're going to address it again, I assure you.
Well, with your permission, and I'll spend some time with Rick. And,
good.
We anticipated doing it, but I told him I'd check with you first.
I believe Mr. Shy had one.
I was going to ask a quick question. What's your feeling on selling all of these utilities of private industry and avoiding the whole problem?
I talked to Mr. Steve Hiller yesterday for about an hour. Thought maybe we could sell them to the state to operate with their satellite system, but Mr. Hiller said he'd be happy to buy.
That's the closest you're going to get, Fred.
Further questions. Appreciate your being here,
I
John.
apologize to go, but I got to go back to 3500 Fort Road.
Thank you very much. Margaret Smith.
It's kind of unusual for me to be doing this. I'm usually the observer, not the talker, but this opportunity to come and tell you that I think you've done a marvelous job in the time that you've had to do it. There are a couple of things that philosophically are my own personal bents. And whether or not they're incorporated in the charter, for whatever it's worth, I'm going to support whatever document comes out the part of it. However, I said that whatever it's worth, it's not worth much.
One vote.
Anyhow, I personally favor the council-manager form of government. I've been in the unique position of observing both forms of government here in the Anchorage area. And I have found to, at least to my way of thinking, the council-manager form is, to me, the better form. Now, this is a personal opinion only. I have never found Anchorage residents hesitant about calling anybody on the council or the assembly when they have a problem. I think we're kind of unique in that way. Secondly, I think I have to agree with Mr. Spencer that you've created kind of a monster. Instead of sort of cutting away the layers of government, you've added on by having a strong elected mayor with the veto power, who can then appoint a manager who is not subject to dismissal by the assembly and not answerable to them in any way. And then underneath that, you've got the assembly again. A perfect way to keep them all in the dark. I also favor very strongly the multi-member district. And that's quite a concession for me because originally I'm still, to some extent, I favor election at large. However, if I'm going to be a little lonely finding wilderness among a group of single-member district voices, then I'll go along with that if it's going to pass the charter, believe me. Anyway, as I said, I have never found Anchorage residents hesitant to call anybody that sits on an elected body to get their voices across. Those are my philosophical points. The one thing that concerns me, and I don't know whether you've had any testimony on this, is Section 1103 on service areas. See, at the rate that Anchorage is growing, if you're going to put up to a vote the formation of every service district, I think you're going to find that you're going to have a government of reaction instead of action. I personally would like to take into consideration the provision in the Juneau Charter for service areas, where the Assembly can institute service areas, and if the residents to be incorporated within that service area are not happy, 10 registered voters, 10, and that's not much, can petition for an election. I think you would have a much smoother running operation, but then again, I'm probably one little voice crying in the wilderness, but please consider that. And then that phrase kind of strikes me as redundant. Why do you have a vote or the written consent of the property owners? I don't understand that particular point.
Mark, that's put in. There are many areas now that are created. There's, for instance, one single property owner. Why put the municipality to the expense of an election if he concurs with it? So it's an or situation.
I see, but the way you have it written here, it makes it sound as though if you don't want to hold a vote in that particular area, you trot around to all the big property owners and say, put your signature on this and you'll get the service,
It'd be the written consent of all the owners. Right. In other words, then, so if you had a vote, they'd all vote for it. So this would really be cheaper for the municipality to go that way.
Let's assume there were 10 property owners, each owning 10 acres. They wanted to come in. If those 10 people would vote in an election for it.
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, it seems as though there's something inherently wrong with that for some reason. I can't put my finger on it. Don't ask me to explain how to change it. I can't.
Mr. Chairman, I think I can explain to you. I think I can explain to you why that is in there. We have areas that subdivide when they're in the process of making a subdivision. It has one owner. And part of the requirements for the one owner to get his financing for homes is that they have road maintenance. And to get road maintenance, he has to be in a service area. The only way he can get in the service area is to petition the assembly to include him in the service area. It says he is the total ownership of that. It's added on to the service area.
What happens, though, when that subdivision is all sold? The property owner, the original property owner, doesn't live there, and the people there don't want road service.
Then they'd have to petition to get out.
They can do that.
Anyway, the one point I would like to make is that I would like you to give serious consideration to having a provision similar to the Juneau one. And again, as I say, it's a personal preference, and if I'm outvoted. And for the record, my name is Margaret Schmidt, and I live at 1650 Oxford Drive. I'm sorry.
Mr. Fisher? Margaret, thank you very much. That provision does work well. I found myself in that situation once, and I think what you're overlooking maybe is the fact that the Assembly still has to prove any change in status of property from one service area to another. I mean, it's not by fiat of the individual that wants to change it. The Assembly still controls the change. In other words, in my particular situation, I wanted to get out of one service area and get into another with a piece of property. And by petition, as a matter of fact, I don't think I ever did. I think I finally dropped it, but at least we had the right to do so. And it does work. I think it needs to be there.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Joseph.
Thank you, Margaret. I'd like to ask you about your observations of the Council and the Assembly, and to invite you to expand on your preference for the Council Manager form. But preface my question by the comment that having been a councilman and an assemblyman, I personally thought I was much more easily manipulated, if you want to use that term, in terms of information by a manager in whose selection I had been implicated than I could have been and was as an assemblyman dealing at arm's length across a separate branch of government. And I'd like to know, in your observation, what you have seen that makes you feel that the councilmen get a better flow of information and less is hidden than what you have seen in the assembly meetings.
Well, it just seems to me that when you have a strong elected executive, most of the decisions that man is making is going to be geared towards the next election.
Is that bad?
Well,
I mean,
not
isn't
always, no, not necessarily always. A manager has to be more on his toes. Now, I know what personalities enter into this a great deal.
Sure.
And you can't really divorce the position from the person who holds it in a great many instances. But it seems to me that if the council is well informed and strong, and remember, every year you're going to have a change, and somebody will get on the council who is not instrumental in having that manager. And they're just, it seems to me that under the manager form, the manager has to be more on his toes, especially if the council is an aware body. And I think we in Anchorage are fortunate in that both elected bodies are very aware and very informed on the whole. As I said, it's a personal preference, and I certainly would not work against passage of the charter.
Well, do you see any advantage in having a mayor elected in terms of his, I don't want to say symbolic, because that implies a ceremonial sort of thing, but in terms of his being an embodiment of the people's sovereignty, that is to say, the statewide, I mean, the local, area-wide official who is responsible to the voters as a whole all over the area and not on a districted basis.
You mean just have a mayor elected at large?
Well, he would be under our proposal. Under a council proposal with a multi-member district, I presume he would be from one of the districts, and there would be no one elected on an area-wide basis.
I don't see any problem with having the mayor elected at large if we had a multi-member body, even though we were only a ceremonial mayor. And really, I don't think the general average run of citizen really notices, you say a strong mayor. George Sullivan is strong to some people. Not because he has the power, but simply by force of personality.
I agree. I agree that we sometimes. I think I said earlier that that a strong mayor will make the system work for him, whether he has a veto or whether he doesn't have a veto. Exactly. I agree with that.
I just hope that you write the kind of charter that will pass this time.
We're trying.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Any other questions from the commission of Mrs. Smith? We'll go on. Is there somebody else who would like to be heard who has not been heard? Well,
I'd like to speak a little further than what I have on a matter pertaining to manager. I know that without a manager, the time when I was on the council, I never would have gotten a difficult job of getting Mountain View paved. That represented an awful lot of footwork of mine, and I was given the opportunity to do it. As both Mark Stones up here knows, he wouldn't have had a job that summer at all, because that was all the work they were doing was the Mountain View paving. And he knows how hard I worked with right-of-way in the departments with the permission of the manager. Now, you can't go to departments as a councilman with any pressure. If you do, you'll soon be removed as a councilman under your oath of office, I believe. Anyway, I didn't work with the chief of police when that alley in Mountain View was a filthy dope outlet. That outfit had 3 of them. And about 3 weeks after I was on the council, that was gone. The guy ran because he knew they were after him.
well, thanks, but
I'd like to ask Ms. Margaret, someone commented at one of the hearings recently that the city council was to be criticized because a lot of their action is taken in work session, and then it doesn't come out that there's just a vote in the general session, and this was a comment against the manager council
I
form.
think you'll find that if you look into the Assembly's actions, a lot of their action is done that way too. It's not just well broadcasting. Believe me, I've tried to make public when the council has done that kind of thing. I think there would be reprimanded.
So that it's an abuse that could happen either way.
Exactly.
If we may go on then to Mr. Wells.
Yes, thank you. I was here last Thursday.
I was too. We missed each other.
And I think it is. Well, that's anything cool. I didn't get to the right place like you did. I'm representing myself. I'm Les Wells, 4120 Tasmina Avenue. I do speak with some background and expertise in the one problem area I'd like to speak to. Having worked with the State of Colorado Budget Commission and School District Budget Organization, and in Alaska for the last 15 years. But first I'd like to say I think the charter reads well. And I thought it was really, people really got it pretty well put together. Then I come tonight and I see some things that, yeah, they may have a point, you know, but I know you're here to debug it, and that's what this is for, and I hope you get the job done, because I know every little pocket, we're all working for the charter, and we all want it to pass. And it's best we can debug it so we get every little pocket voting for it instead of standing off from it or finding something to criticize. So I'm here to help, I hope. That's nice. I like the Mola District Assembly, Assembly District. I listen to the man who's got great expertise in that, his study. I still see wards and kingdoms, and I lived through some of that in my day. I don't know. I like what you've got there. Yes, I prefer the city manager council, borough manager council, but that isn't, I want all these, those are things that should go where you think the majority of the people want them, because the majority does vote. And I think you got to read them as accurately as you can without giving up what you really believe. You've got to fight for those things. I do think that there's something about this runoff on this first election that sounds like maybe you better check that out. Service districts look good. I think the point they made on it was worthwhile. Community councils look good. I think that's an improvement in the charter this time. The ombudsman, you kept it in. Well, that's fine. If you think you're going to, if it's that important to you, individually and collectively, or you think it's going to increase your voting power, fine. But I really wonder if we should get a little experience with the state ombudsman. You have an elected, you have in here an elected mayor, a strongly elected mayor. He's the ombudsman. That's why you want to elect him, so you can get to him. Now you got to have an ombudsman to get through to. I don't know. Well, anyway, on the ombudsman, if you have to leave it in, why not leave it in though that there may be an ombudsman with the legislative body voting 2/3 for it. I mean, you've got the intent there without you letting the government people do it. Well, I don't know how you people saw it, but I want to mention the school board election matter. I think you've got the message. I think I hope you heard it. I think it's a kind of a small item, but it's important because there's a pocket that would lose your votes, and it's not necessary. I think the school board is of a borough-wide organization now. I think they have served the borough completely. It's not a new entity, so I think the right track there. The other item I would speak to, and I'm not going to speak to it long, I'm going to give you a handout, I'm going to speak to it most briefly, and then hope that you come, what I would think to be the solution is that you seek out the administration of the school district. I am not the administration of the school district. I am middle management, but I'm one of those boys who do a lot of the gut work. The point that I would make to you is that I'd like to have you look over the first page, which is the current program and budget cycle we're on. It's really from, we'll start here in July, a new budget year, fiscal year 75-76. In August, we start our pre-planning, and by October, when the principals and department heads have the school year underway, they go into the hard plan in the budget in October, on through into December. We collate it and put it together and come up with the grandiose figure, and then start hacking in January, get it to the school board in February, March, public hearings and so forth, board action in March, assembly for a month in April, and the sooner we get it back, so the sooner we get it to them, the sooner we get back. But so in May and June we start implementing for the following September school year. Well, that's a pretty clean operation. Yeah, I know you're trying to clean up something else. You're trying to clean up what our CPAs and auditors and so forth, they like neat packages. And I know enough about CPA, and I've got enough accounting background. I know what they're after. I've worked with them for years, and I know they like nice, clean packages. I think program budget management systems are here to serve people, not to serve the auditors and the CPAs. I think we've got to be clean with them, but they should not dictate to the service what you want to do with and how you do it. And I think that the problem here is, and I want to bring in sharp focus, so that I don't have the solution. I do say that the beginning of the solution is to get with the people who work this continuously in the school district, so that we can manage a planned program budget. It also, I'll just leave that second page for that's your proposed cycle. You've lengthened the cycle, and it was tough even put that cycle together because it's so elongated. But on the third page, the effects of turning in a budget in September means that a principal and the department head is going to have to start no later than March in planning his program, because you got to plan program to justify budget. And he's got to do it in April and May when you've got all your school programs to put together that affects kids. That's when you're doing your programming planning for kids. And that's a little different from the budget. You're getting ready to implement in September. But anyway, the elongated budget process lengthened the process from 9 months to 18 months. Then two, it overlaps 3 budget years. Hey, what budget year you're talking about? The one we're in, or the one we're about to begin, or the one we're planning for? No, I know it's nuts and bolts, but I think that it's real important, that second point. So that I make here in that third page. Number 3, hey, folks, if you want to, I know we get blamed padding the budget all the time anyway. The school district, any organization does, any government organization does. But
we have pretty hard data and we hit enrollment. We don't say, well, we think there's going to be so many kids. We come within 1 to 3% almost all the time. That doesn't just happen. That's planned. But we can't plan it any sooner than we have been planned. The kids aren't there to count so we can project. So we don't have the enrollment projection. We don't have the cost analysis, the pricing. Hey, from the budget year we're in just finished, we take all prices, we project the inflation of the trend. And so we can tighten down that budget. We know salary data. 18 months ahead, now let's see what the teacher's going to ask for, what the maintenance people are going to ask for, all this. Agreements aren't made, cost of living isn't in 18 months and ahead, especially this day and age. Lack of recency of program planning, 18 months again, is pretty tough to try to get teachers and everybody to put things together in budget. Okay, and then very importantly, the legislative intent. We haven't even, on every other year, we haven't even elected our House of Representatives. You know, by the time they go down to Juneau, we know what the governor's going to do, what he's going to project. We know our legislators, and we've all met with them. And when they go down there, we have a pretty good idea. And by March, this year, luckily, by end of March, we had the actual bill passed. Well, that's for this coming year, though, not for another year. You people are super well. Number 4, no experience factor with the immediate preceding budget. And the thing I'm saying, I don't think we ought to, I don't think we play games with the state at the borough level and the school district level. But if the borough puts their money on the line or don't put it on the line, 12 months in advance, the state legislature is going to say they don't need 100% funding for schools, 100% funding, and with the school district picking up for those extra things they want to do. Right now, 75% of the budget does come from the state, 25 from local, or another source, 25 from local. We don't know what the state's going to do as early as this plan calls for action. My solution, let's look at what is most important. Kids and education, and good planning and tight planning and well-spent dollars, or good systems for CPAs, auditors, and so forth. Now, that's what it is. I know you don't like deficit financing. I don't either. But it's only 6 months. Everybody understands you get your evaluation in January, and in June you're going to get your millage rate and your tax bill, and you pay for it from June on, from the first year. I know that it's a little tricky, but no. Let's, now, solution. I don't have it. I think hopefully you'll project to the school district, to the power structure, the board, and work with them. You'll come out with something that everybody can live with, I'm sure, and that's important. So that something everybody can live with. So we'll, in education, school district employees and everybody, it's a big system. 3,500 people work for them and 40,000 kids. It's too big, but it's what we got here in this community. We want support, and we want the best education for all.
Thank you very much, Les.
Mr. Chairman?
Before there are any questions, we're still under a constraint of time. It's now 9:20, and I would hope that you keep your questions and replies very brief so that others can be heard. And Mary?
Mr. Chairman, we have asked for further input in relation to the proposed financial statements, but we did hear before we put it in the first time that they thought it would be real nice if they had some idea before they went into heavy budgeting sessions approximately how much they'd get for the coming year, and that this would accomplish that.
That's another whole concept.
For having to do it finally, they have not made their final comments. Yes.
Are there other questions of Mr. Wells from the commission?
I think it's a reason here is a mistake. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Les. Appreciate you being here. Are there others in the audience who wish to be heard? Gentleman in the back, middle of the back.
I'd just like to address two particular items in the board charter.
Would you mind identifying yourself?
Yeah, my name is Charles Dickey. I've been in Hampton government for many years and have seen the 2 forms of government in the area, the city and rural. And personally, I would be very strongly in favor of the city manager or rural manager type government as compared to the strong executive elected mayor. I think that, as we commented earlier, that you're putting in an extra layer of government in your, when you have the charter presently proposed, is not needed. And from having observed the results over the years, I've always, although I've very little of the time lived within the city, I've usually lived outside of the incorporated limits of the city. I've always felt that the city was far better managed than our borough has been. And the only thing that I can attribute that to is their city manager form of government. And one other thing that I would suggest, I think the election districts could be a multi-man district for perhaps 2 men elected from each of 4 districts. 4 districts with 2 assemblymen or assembly persons elected from each district, and then 3 elected at large.
Knew somebody'd come along, Jim.
I think that that would be a balance of perhaps of 2 types, that some are strongly for a single-member district or multi-member district, or some for having them all elected at large. I think that this would give you a community or area representation, and then you would have those that were elected at large and representing the community at large more fully. You could, by the same plan, you could have 8 one-member districts if you wanted to go that route, but I would suggest 4 two-man districts with 3 assemblymen elected at large, or perhaps 2 assemblymen and a mayor elected at large. The mayor to sit on the council and to be primarily a red carpet mayor, handling the ribbon cuttings and this sort of thing, with the administration of the borough under a trained executive. I think there are several reasons that I would suggest this. I think in many cases you might have a great personality, or a man who has a lot of television appeal that might get himself elected our borough mayor and not really have an awful lot of administrative talent or ability. Whereas if the council is selecting a city manager, they can go to someone with years of experience and training for that particular job, and wherever they have to go for to hire him, they can bring in the best man for the job, and he serves then at the pleasure of the council. Personally, I think that this would be a far superior form of government.
Thank you, Mr. Dickey. Are there any questions of Mr. Dickey by Mr. Charlie? Not. May I, before I call on you, may I ask if there's anybody here who is under a constraint of leave for some other meeting or something? Young lady over here. Well, if you don't mind, you care to speak now?
The only thing that I want to say is that I...
Would you identify yourself, please?
918 R Street inside the city of Rinsden, and I've spoken to the Charter Commission before. My comments are on record, and there's no reason for me to reiterate them. I only would say that I think the charter you have produced is really quite an excellent working document. I have communicated my concern on the subject of school board elections to one individual. Feel it's probably a good idea to make it on the public record, and that is, I think it is politically an unwise move to make all 7 school board members run again, and I think everybody probably agrees with that, so there's no reason why I'm saying it. And I also would just, since I feel very much in the minority here tonight, I do want to reiterate one point that I made earlier. Since everybody seems to be against what you put in terms of strong mayor form of government, I will be the one lone voice to say tonight that I am very much in favor, and all my reasons are on record. Thank you.
I'll take that.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the commission? Call on.
My name is David Doris. I live at 895 Carson Circle.
Doris?
Doris.
Doris.
D-O-R-I-S.
After having read charters that run hundreds of pages to deal with minute details, I looked at the minute details and they're not here. And after I analyzed it, I found out I sure am glad. I like the concise nature of it. I would like to recommend some things to your attention. One of which I would not even have commented on, except that the testimony is going, and I find that the council members with a strong executive would be a highly desirable form of government. I cannot agree with some of the testimony that you're adding another layer. In this one, there is no strong mayor government that does not have a city manager that works there. He's frequently called an administrative assistant, and he's hired without any council manager approval, and he pretty well runs the operation of the government with the mayor handling the political aspects and direction. I think the compromise that the Charter Commission has drawn, this particular one, is highly commendable. While we may occasionally elect mayors who do not have great administrative ability, we seem to have a good chance for elected legislators who don't have great legislative. So that there seems to be a bit of a balance here when we do stupidities because it's 9 and 2. If there are chances we can correct them. And while President Ford occasionally vetoes something that I find to be very important, I can still live with those difficulties when they have the advantage of the other. I think the system is recommended. There's many advantages. I quite frankly think one of those advantages that have seen in the last year in Europe. I would also indicate that it is my past experience with city managers and city bankers that they're not very amenable to citizens talking to the city manager. And then when you talk to your councilman, he is only one voice on 8 or 9, and you can't get anything done. I think that one man that you can go to, you can vote for it, whether somebody else is very, very important. And I will commend you on that front. I have very mixed feelings on the multi-member district. I tend to prefer a single-member district. I do not like a lot of elections, but this one, to have 2 or 3 members from one district is something that I can live with. However, I do find that I also prefer school board members, if they are not appointed, which happens to be the system I they tend to wind up from one district or one area of the community. So stocking district, and my kids have different problems, different needs, and I am not represented by school board members elected big budget as long as election. I want to be able to vote and talk to a school board member who lives where I live, who knows those problems, communicate those. And I do not find the large city at all. I personally like the 20 school boards from districts. I think you get a more professional job. I do not think that's in Anchorage, so we're not even all the residents of the nation certainly like to see. There is one very, very important point that may have been overlooked. The newspapers called my attention in the last 3 or 4 days. And that is a revision that I'd like to see someplace within the discussion of the legislative body, a provision that says there shall be no pension by virtue of service in the assembly. I think the pensions for assemblymen is one of the biggest big laws that have ever been invented by the Congress of the United States and the legislature in the last of our council. That is a provision that should be a charter provision that makes it possible for that.
You don't think we'd lose any votes if we did that?
No.
You might lose 11.
Not 11.
I don't quite understand the gentleman's discussion about the school budget. There are 2 comments I would like to make in regard to the school budgeting and the capital budget. I did not know the fiscal constraints on changing the budget years, but those budget years ought to be the same.
Can't.
Well, maybe they can, but as a taxpayer, if there's any way they can, so that I know the full impact of how my funds are being used and expended. And I think if there's any way at all that can be done, it's very important. In line with the capital budget, I find it very strange. I do think it's strange. One that we set out specifically 2 boards.
2 what?
2 boards. One is the planning commission, that we just set out for something super special, and the rights commission. We've got 10 or 15 or 20 boards. We're all important. These are all ought to be entered, they all ought to be. But I don't understand why it's not a requirement in your capital budget for that capital budget to go to the planning commission for its consideration, and maybe even the original put together. Several years ago, the schools were a lot of money, $7 million. There was a study by the borough on capital budgeting procedures and how it would be done to get before the people, with the planning commission input into it. And I think that's very critical before it goes to the assembly, that they have not only the mayors and the next department representation. There are, in the transition phase, I was a little surprised that there is not really an assurance that people in government are not going to lose. Okay, well, that's part of the situation. That's true. Attrition will take care of. But it's also attrition on those charges that were passed. The provision that indicates here the current employees, etc. Really leaves that particular item a little up in the air. I do think some assurance is there that people that put in their careers, and it's only a year and a half, counting their job, and some assurance that they will be able to continue employment, nutrition, and take care of them. And it does take time sometimes, but we're not having to run a cutthroat business, and we're not having to cut people's throats since government. In the transition phase, I'd also like to point that it says when there is a conflict between 2 ordinances, and the mayor says that it should be This one simply says there should not be. I'm wondering if the mayor should then have an opportunity to veto that. It would seem like you're operating to veto there first, and that the council's action in the transition period on the decision which law is after should be final. Whether the mayor decide, council agree to decide, mayor veto, council overrule, let the council have a second word. Those are the major considerations. I think you can shorten by taking out the two conditions you got linked with all of them. I think the capital budget item is very personal for participants. It's very emotional. The strong mayor has his administrative assistant, called manager, the council, resort, and a bunch of improved form of government, one of the two that we've seen here past.
Are there any questions of my folks? If not, thank you very much for being here, for your expressions. Councilor Dittman?
For the record, I'm Terry Dittman, live at 3437 Dixon Drive in the borough. I'm here basically as a listener, and I've really learned a lot listening to all the comments said tonight. And one thing I wanted to bring out, community councils, I am involved with one and active with it and think it's a very good idea. In theory and on paper, what you have written here scares me. I don't know how you could write it. I've really fretted about this for a week or so before I came tonight. I don't know how you could word it or how you could say it, but I think we should be very careful not to be establishing another level of government by giving councils power for the different services that they need. Maybe an isolated case where Girdwood may need something, and so therefore they can better keep an eye on it and control it from where they live. Can we do that separately rather than giving a blanket council everywhere all the councils that would form in the borough or whatever city the power to do this? I'm really afraid that we might be setting up another level of government that would be very, very sorry for later. Because I know that in working on a council myself, we were just approved last Monday night, the limited number of people who came to our meetings and who were involved in setting up the council scares me. I feel that maybe I'm even being too pushy at our meetings in letting my views be carried away and saying, well, I want it this way. And there aren't that many people that object. And so I'm just saying that let's be very careful. It's a limited number of people who get active unless there's an issue. And then when there's an issue, you've got a lot of people. Did I make myself clear at all?
Mr. Chairman, I think I'd like to answer a little bit on that. The first part of the community council says that the community it's the intent to provide for the maximum community self-determination without infringing upon the rights or persons not represented by the community council. And it does say in relation to the powers that they may provide for each community council to supervise the furnishing of powers. It doesn't say they shall provide. And it says that the powers will be negotiated with the assembly. In other words, they would not supposedly be allowed to take on a power that would infringe upon the rights of those that were not in the community council. And if they take on a power to furnish a service, the governing body for that would have to be elected from an area. Now, we did miss getting that last word in the sentence. It was from the election from the community council area if it's being used as a service area. It wasn't to be elected from within the community council. It was supposedly all eligible voters within the community council area would have a right to vote on the commissioners that would govern that service.
But, okay, now, the present area, for example, of our community council isn't necessarily what might be considered a district or whatever that you're going to set up, or that will be set up by the new legislative body. So then what do you do?
It says may. It doesn't say it has to.
Yeah, I have an opinion about this too, and I tend to agree with Terry's interpretation a little bit more than Mary's, but I'm not going to voice that because I don't think it's appropriate to do so. And we appreciate your concern, and I have a sentence here.
Okay, well, one more thing. In the first part of it, I was going to answer Mary again. The first part, okay, here it is. Without infringing upon the rights of persons not represented by the community council. The persons who are not represented by the community council are basically the people who don't react until it's too late.
Agreed.
And we really got to consider those people. I mean, they're voters, they're taxpayers, they're people who live, they just don't either have time or the interest to become involved until it's too late. And I just want to say I think we should be very careful.
Thank you very much, Terry. If there are any other questions, we'll entertain them. But the chair is going to call for about a 5-minute recess, maybe 7 or 8 minute recess. So you get up and stretch, and then we will try to take those people who have not been heard before, and then people who have been heard at other meetings.
I wonder how many we have left.
I would like to call the public hearing back into session. Is there anyone else here who has not been heard who would like to be heard? Mr. Whitson?
I'd like to move on here where I can see everybody. My name is Carl Whitson. I'm here tonight representing the Libertarian Party of Baton Rouge. And I'd like to start right at the top with the preamble and list the objections that the Libertarian Party has asked me to correct you.
Mr. Whitson, do you have that in written form also?
I can provide it to your secretary in written form tomorrow. I have it in written form and I do not have copies.
I would appreciate it if you would give it to the secretary, and I would appreciate it if you move rapidly through it because I know there are a couple others with extensive documentation.
I think it will be
fine. Thank you.
The preamble recognizes the existence of individual rights. I'm glad to see that. But it fails to recognize that those rights are unalienable. Unalienable rights must be guaranteed, not supported. We all support the ideal of peace, but I, for one, would fight to preserve my individual rights, and I expect my government to do the same. The body of the Charter
instead restricts those very rights. It's all power to the government. The phrase in the preamble that says maximize local control of local affairs turns out to mean local government control of people's affairs. The phrase more responsive government is mentioned in the preamble, and yet the charter calls for multi-member assembly districts. That's not more responsive. The assembly has the power to tax and borrow without a vote of people. That's not more responsive. The school board is left unchanged. That's not more responsive. Community councils are transformed into another level of government. That's not more responsive. A recall petition requires signatures of 25% of the voters. That's not more responsive. Article 2, I don't have it in front of me, but it sets out an all-powerful government. That puts a tremendous burden on those of us who would like limits in the charter, who think that a charter should be written to protect people from the government. People in that situation, with this phrase as the beginning and the essence of the charter, are put in the position of having to think of everything conceivable that the government might do to them on protection from here onto the future. We would rather see it turned around so that the charter provides or lists the powers that the government may have and limits the powers to those specific items. That would turn it around and put the burden on the Charter Commission to make sure that the government has the power to operate. Section 2.02 has to do with initiative and referendum, in which those rights are denied to the people in all important matters. That's all matters having to do with money. Section 2.03, people's right of recall is greatly weakened when 25% of the voters are required on signature instead of 10%. Article 3, Section 1, should provide for single-member districts. Section 2B, district residency is too long. A person shouldn't have to reside in a district a full year before he's called to make decisions on what his constituency wants. This town isn't all that big. I would recommend that the term not be as low as 30 days, but perhaps 6 months or 3 months. 1 year is unreasonable anyway. Section 3.05 must be a mistake. Why does the Assembly have 30 days to fill one vacancy, but only 7 days to fill 6 vacancies? No appointed Assemblyman should serve more than 6 months without having to face the voters. I hope that's a mistake also. I hope the intent wasn't to have Assemblyman serve for a full year without having to face the voters. Section 4.03B may have been an oversight. This section allows the Assembly to remove the mayor if they so choose. Section 405 provides that the manager should take over the mayor's duties. One of the things that the mayor can do is sit on the Assembly and have all the rights of Assemblymen except the vote. And I don't think we want the manager to sit on the Assembly and be making motions and amendments to motions and that sort of thing. I think he should be limited more. Article 5, Section 1, Section
section on community councils. And community councils should be established by the people and only recognized by the Assembly. They should not be established by the Assembly. Section 2. Governmental power should not be shared with the community council. Governmental powers. One local government is enough. We share powers with community councils and we have another local government. A series of local governments. If one government is enough, then what's the purpose of unification? Also in Section 3, community councils should establish their own duties and functions. They should not be ruled by the Assembly. They should be autonomous organizations. Article 6, Section 1B provides for, I think, publishing of ordinances or a summary. A summary isn't good enough. The whole text should be published. Also, it might be appropriate to put in that section a prohibition so that no public funds should be used for advertising of ordinances. Section 2, under Article 6, allows the Assembly to levy additional taxes, borrow money, and convey land without a vote of the people. No good. Section 6.03, adoption of emergency ordinances or emergency procedures should require a unanimous vote of the Assembly. If there's one person on the Assembly who doesn't think there's an emergency, then certainly an emergency doesn't exist. Also, the mayor should retain full veto power over emergency actions. Section 6.04, I don't agree that any adoption of any law should be allowed by reference. No law should be passed without the Assembly reading that law, understanding it, and acting on it individually. Section 7.02, we take a stand against the method of deciding a tie. We think that at least 40% plurality should be required and the runoff procedure should be used. Article 8, dealing with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan should govern the municipal government and not the future development of the municipality. We don't need our lives planned. The government needs planning. I don't. The charter should not require a planning commission. If the planning commission becomes unpopular or useless, the ordinance should simply be repealed. It shouldn't require that there always be one even if people don't want it. Article 9. The school board should be elected from single-member districts. And all the arguments for single-member districts on the Assembly apply to the school board equally well. We would end up with a more responsive body. In Article 10, Section 2, there's talk about analysis of the budget. And we think such an analysis should provide, should include the cost to a representative taxpayer. That would be more meaningful to the general public. The type of analysis that we usually see. Section 10.06, if revenues exceed budget estimates, no more expenditures should be allowed, especially not without public hearing. Section 10.06B, City appropriations should be funded from within the budget. No notes should be issued without a public hearing and a vote of the people. Again, I think that the word emergency is overworked. If there truly is an emergency, then some other areas should suffer. There must be some problems if there's an emergency. If there are no problems, if we just want to spend more money, then we should be happy to be forced to use regular procedures. Public hearings and so on. Section 10.07 B. This section allows the budget to be rewritten at any time during the year without public notification. Why is there a requirement for public hearings in the budget process if the next week all of those items in the budget can be rearranged by the Assembly or by the Mayor? Article 11. The power to tax people without limit is totally unacceptable to libertarians. And I hope to all angry taxpayers, there must be a limit on taxation. Section 11.01B should say no tax ordinance is valid until ratified by the people. I think it applies just to sales tax. Section 11.02B, this section makes a property tax mandatory forever, requiring that any other taxes or revenues will be in addition to and not a substitute for property taxes. Section 11.02, taxes should not be a first lien on the property. The first mortgage holder should have the first lien. Article 12.01, the reasons for borrowing should be specifically itemized and limited. The total amount of borrowing must be limited. Unlimited borrowing gives rise to unlimited taxation. Again, we must have the limits. Section 12.02. Both revenue bonds and general obligation bonds should require a vote. Again, I hope that was an oversight that just revenue bonds require a vote. Certainly general obligation bonds should also. Section 12.05. There should be no statute of limitations placed on crimes committed by the government. If someone's rights have been violated and a court agrees that someone's rights have been violated, he should have redress. He should get some money. He should have things changed.
Which section are you speaking of in that?
That's section 12.05. I think it sets a limit as to the time that a person can sue the government. Article 13, having to do with municipal utilities. It's our position that no municipal utilities should be operated except during the transition period. That they should simply be sold and the funds used to retire the debt. However, I'm not sure that this is going to gain enough support that will be followed through. If such government businesses are allowed, then the charter must guarantee people's right to free market competition. In other words, if there are government-operating municipalities, private enterprise must be allowed to compete with those and try to provide better and cheaper services. Article 14, That's the equal rights section, I believe it is. This section is a corruption of the word rights. A total corruption. The right to someone else's property doesn't exist. Never exists. A right to one's own property is what must be guaranteed. Let me look at the actual document for a minute. There's some problems. That list of things that cannot be discriminated against, I've never seen that list quite that long before. And it does some funny things. In the financing area, for instance, it means that a person who wants to lend money cannot discriminate and lend to people over the age of 16, for instance. Cannot discriminate if he's lending money because of age. In education, it seems to give people the right to have their children educated, even if they're uneducated. In the area of housing, it disallows the right of a property owner to choose who he wants to rent his apartment or his spare bedroom to on the basis of whether that person is married or single. That's not the way to solve the housing problem. And it's certainly not anyone's right to have the use of someone else's property for his housing. Property owner's right to use or dispose of that property as he so chooses. Section 1407, the oath of office, doesn't include provisions that the office holder will be required to uphold the Constitution or the Charter. The government should not be exempt from adverse possession unless other property owners are also. Adverse possession is either a proper system or it's improper. 1410. This section again just claims unlimited power for the government. Article 1501 requires concurrence of a majority of qualified voters to amend the charter. Certainly that's a mistake. A majority of qualified voters don't even vote.
You mean add the word voting?
Voting on the proposed amendment.
Majority of those voting on the proposed amendment.
It doesn't say that.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Read the last part of the sentence.
This charter may be amended only upon the concurrence of the majority of qualified voters in the English voting on the proposed amendment.
We can attempt to reword it, but we see your intent, Carl. That's those votes.
Make my point if it's wrong, I'm sorry. Section 16.02, I think is going to lose a lot of votes. It seems to preserve all agencies and employees of all the present governments. How this can be a cheaper form of government is beyond me. I personally
those people and those agencies which should be eliminated be designated in the section of the charter having to do with transition, and provision made for severance pay or some other such system that would guarantee the vote of those people who may lose a job. But to impose all of those agencies and all of those people on a new government, and then to claim, at the same time, to claim that we're unified to reduce costs, is ridiculous. Section 1605 provides for a law by administrative order with no provision for public hearings. People should be allowed to know what's going on, have time to react. The limits on government power, which don't seem to be in the charter, which those of us who want some limits have to bring up because of, I think, Article 2 says government is all powerful unless limited, are the following: taxation, which has been mentioned. Also, the amount of land in government ownership. There's a very minute amount of land within the borough that's in private ownership now, and it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And that small amount of land provides a tax base for the operation of the government. The smaller the amount of land and the smaller the number of taxpayers, the higher the cost, even with the same amount of land. I heard someone mention earlier, I think it was Arliss, that there is a method of exclusion from service districts. I didn't find it in there. It certainly should be. Also, there should be a limit that no tax levied against one group, no tax can be levied against one group for the benefit of another. Unless, with possible exception, that a majority of those being taxed would vote in favor of such a thing. There also should be a limit on types of things tax monies can be used for. And those are charities. Certainly a government's function is not to choose my charity. Other governments, my tax money to the local government should not be used to support another government, whether that's the state government or the Kenai borough or a lower form of government such as the community council. No public funds should be used for advertising campaigns. And no public funds should be used to incarcerate people not accused of crimes. I bring that up because of recent budget discussions. I learned that the borough is getting into the mental health field now. And presumably at some time in the near future, we'll have mental health clinics and mental health hospitals. It's the right of all individuals to have their freedom unless they violate someone else's rights. They should not be incarcerated. Public funds should not be used for that. Merely because, in someone's judgment, they may, at some time in the future, commit a crime. Certainly we all commit criminal. That ends my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carl. Are there any questions of Mr. Bates?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Lisa.
With regard to section 201, it says that the municipality can exercise legislative powers. Instead of listing them, we think that maybe that if the municipality wishes to take on a new power, that the people should be able to vote on that.
Off the top of my head, that sounds like a reasonable compromise.
Fisher. Mr. Whitson, Carl, you started out by taking on this more responsive government and showing a number of places where it's less responsive, and it may be a difference of opinion, or maybe we're not basing it on the same thing, but it seems to me that the items that you've mentioned in the charter that weren't as responsive, I don't know what as responsive as what, and I think that we can say that this is a more responsive charter than the present system of local government, and I think that's what we're saying, and I think that your testimony would support that, because in all items that you've mentioned that you objected to, the local situation is either the same or worse at the present time.
Right.
And
Excuse me,
so
but I did pick up a copy of the city charter and read through it a couple of times, and based on that, I disagree.
Well, okay, I certainly have that right. So anyway, I was leading up to a question, and I overall, then, I'd like the party's view of the whether or not they would support the charter present.
In its present form?
Yeah.
Well, of course, we would not support the charter in its present form.
Okay. You didn't make that clear, and I was. Are there other questions? Thank you for being here, and we will anticipate a copy of your testimony, if you would, and our office can disseminate it to all the commissioners for you. Appreciate it very much. I saw Mr. Keller requesting a moment ago.
Yes, my name is Millett Keller. I'm a resident of Section 4. I have been very impressed by the efforts of the Charter Commission and by the document that's been produced. There are some things that I would like to react to. I've summarized my result for the remarks I'm going to make, and I'll give this to Debbie when I'm finished. I'm concerned, first of all, with the structure of the executive. It appears that the major reason for having the mayor with veto power is to provide a system of checks and balances. But I think what comes out is not a system of checks and balances, but is a built-in system of conflict. And to further emphasize that fact, and to enable this conflict to take place, the Assembly is also going to have the power to hire staff, promote the conflict, and because the Assembly will not have the power, it will also be able to have an ombudsman who can circumvent the power of the mayor, or at least can do things that the Assembly can in terms of getting into the administrative side of local government. So I would feel very strongly that the strong mayor is going to build in conflicts rather than checks and balances. There are some small things which I'll just skip over in this whatever, but I would, in terms of the in section 2.03, I wasn't sure in looking at that whether in a two-member district, I think that as I understand it, there won't be an assemblyman running at the same time the mayor runs. Are you grinning like something's brought this up to your attention?
Right, yeah, we got a problem.
So that it would be impossible to recall someone else in those districts. In response to this three-man district concept, I think that it would be possible for, if we had an assembly manager form, to have 10 members of
assembly, the 11th being the mayor elected at large. So you have 10. If you have 4 districts, it would be 2 3-member districts, 2 2-member districts, and 1 at large assembly. The at large would be the mayor. In section 3.05, it's not clear to me whether an appointed person would have to have the same qualifications as an elected person. In reading that, I think I could interpret that either way, that you could actually appoint somebody who didn't have the same qualifications as somebody who was elected. In section 4.05, I think that anybody who's going to take the position of the mayor should be an elected person. If we have a strong mayor form of government, then in the absence of the mayor, there should be a mayor pro tem or somebody who's been elected in assemblyman, in other words, who can take the place of the mayor in his absence rather than an appointed official. I have grave concerns about the community councils. I, again, feel very much as it indicated that we are unifying our government by allowing them to have powers. And furthermore, almost creating a de facto legislative body, because we're, by ordinance, able to set up boards of supervisors, but the charter, I think anybody who's going to be elected can have powers to control or manipulate or dispense municipal services. Powers of the charter not to be enacted by Congress. The way the community council is set up here. I think that they should be advisory in nature, and I'm not sure that it's really necessary to have the provision in the charter to require them. Some of the wording in section 9.07, I think it's just my misunderstanding about how the sequence of events is reviewing the budget in this commission, but I have explained that in the document. Also in 10.06b, I still don't understand, and I've been talking to this group about that before, and I've got a suggested wording for that I'll put in there. In 10.07b, I think there are 2 different concepts that are presented there. One deals with what the mayor can do, and another deals with what the assembly can do, and I think that might, to make it easier to read, might be broken into a part C. The last 2 sentences deal with what the assembly can do.
Was that, I'm sorry, Bill, was that 10.07 B?
Paragraph B.
Okay.
I also don't think we ought to throw out the school board. I think that I would very much favor designated seats, but I just don't think when it comes time to sell the chart that you're going to have to describe what seats A through whatever it is, F, E, or G. I think it'd be much easier to say it's going to be just like it is now, and we're not going to throw them out. Maybe down the road the charter should be amended to have designated seats. It's a very crucial concept that should be implemented on the school board. I have, in reacting to some of the other comments tonight, I can't agree with this idea that the school board members should be elected from districts, because I can see the possibility where the people that live out around Dartmouth High School are not going to like what's going on out of Diamond High School, and we'll never get a school budget passed because they can't agree with what they're going to do at school and in the school. All these people on the school board are going to be sitting about whether they're going to have football or at the expense of West High's tennis program or something like that. And I think the school board has got to be an area-wide body. I can just see a disaster otherwise.
terms of strong mayor, one of the arguments that was presented was that the system we should emulate what we have at the national level because of the veto power and the state level. And I always come to my mind that if we adopt that concept that because the president can veto the Congress and therefore we have checks and balances, that we ought to consider partisan politics at the local level also, because we've also got that for the governor and the president too. Well, obviously we won't consider partisan politics at the local level, and I think we would also go reverse. In 1606B, the transition provisions on finance, I think you may have been some contact with the city on this, but it mentions here the Greater Anchorage Area Borough Assembly to prepare a budget. I think really the mayor is the one who's going to have to do that 6-month budget. And then there's no provision in here as to how the city budget's going to be adopted. So I propose some wording in here which would specify that the borough mayor would propose this budget for the 6 months, and the city manager would prepare the city's budget for next year. Both of those budgets would be submitted to the newly elected body. That proposed wording is in here. As far as the assets and liabilities, I'm concerned that we don't make this government too complicated in terms of the assets and liabilities. It seems to me that the disposal of utilities, as well as the amenities that have been purchased both by the city and the borough, has to be looked at on a community-wide basis. Granted, I think that the majority of the people that are telephone users now live outside the city. So from that standpoint, there's a majority of outside the city people that really are the ones that are paying for it, paying back the revenue bonds and so forth. In terms of concern about ML&P profits going to defray expenses on the hillside, the reverse is true, and the hillside people will also help pay for what we see in the report. I think overall, these things are going to all balance themselves out, and the community as a whole is going to benefit from one comprehensive system of distributing assets and liabilities. Also, I think assets and liabilities always have to be talked about together. We start talking about the assets being in one place and the liabilities being in the other place. The general order is going to find a tremendous reason why this charter is no good, because he hasn't got both of them. He's got the assets, but he doesn't have the liabilities, or he's got the revenue, but he doesn't have the assets. It's too complicated. I think the way it is here is simple, and it will work the way it's set. And will make the charter a saleable document. The one feature that I hope is preserved is the multi-member districts. I personally feel that multi-member districts are far more responsive to the voters than single-member districts. If I'm sitting out there in a single-member district, I only get to vote for my elected representative once every 3 years. And then that person who is supposedly my voice on the council is only 1 out of 11. I supposedly cannot go to the other 10 people because they really don't represent me according to the concept of single-member districts. In a multi-member district, I have 3 people, 3 out of 11, that I can talk to if I have a concern, or you can talk to if you have a concern. It appears to me that body is much more responsive to my needs. Almost a third of those people are directly responsible to me. I'm their constituent.
Plus, every year I get a chance to turn one of them out. He's not doing the job. Because there'll be one of the three up for election every year. So to me, that legislative body is very responsive when we have multi-member districts. And I think that's the most important reason that we should have multi-member districts is that it's much more responsive. I'll do this together.
Thank you, Miller. Are there any questions of Mr. Keller from the Commission?
One thing. Opposed neighbors in our district.
Let's wait until the Commission has an
I'm going
opportunity.
to answer his question now on the multiple.
Let's wait until it comes.
We got 2 carpet bags in ours.
Are there any questions from the Commission of Mr. Keller?
Well, only this, you tried, I appreciate your remarks very much, but on this matter of the mayor, I didn't understand what you meant when you said that what we have done is to create a conflict-creating situation instead of checks and balances. To me, the checks and balances are inherently conflicting and are meant to be conflicting, and that's really the beauty of it. So, is there a way to have checks and balances without conflict, and if so, what way would that be? Or should there not be checks and balances?
Well, it's just a philosophical difference. See, I don't think that the conflict should be there. Not in local government. I think at the state where the thing is removed by distance, or at the national level where it's removed by time, that we need that. But at the local level, I mean, we're all here and we see it every day, and I don't think we need that conflict.
But you know, there's been some testimony that position that we should try to eliminate conflict at the local level is a sound one, where you have a very static community, but where you have a dynamic and changing community, and there are in fact real philosophical conflicts, as there are reflected in this room, as there was reflected last night in the school board meeting. It seems to me just healthy that the local government reflect that conflict, that it be a forum for that conflict, and that it all hang out, and to try to create a system where it's submerged and it's all done sort of in the administration, and then the paperwork is neatly put before the councilman is unfair. It's a fiction, because it doesn't really reflect the vitality and the conflict that is really a plus in many ways in the community. We all get tired of it, but we are a vital community, and it's good that we do have these differences, and they ought to be. If they exist among us, why shouldn't they exist in the local government? I don't want to belabor it, but I just wanted to raise this matter of how you avoid conflict, and whether you should avoid conflict in a community like Anchorage, where the conflict, sure enough, is there.
I think the conflict will be in the legislative the concept of the old town meeting, the town forum. You've got 11 people that are representing all the constituency, being the whole community, and they have the administrative responsibility for the government. So I think that's where you can have the conflict, where it should be.
Mr. Peck, did you wish to?
No, I just mentioned that in the legislature in our district, multiple districts, we've got 2 out of 4 in the legislature that are carpetbaggers, don't even live in them. That shouldn't happen in those multiple districts.
Juneau, not local.
Right, that's what I was referring to.
Any similarity between our charter and state government is purely coincidental.
Are there any other questions from the Commission to Mr. Keller? There's a lady over here. Do you wish to be here?
Yes, please.
Would you?
My name is Mrs. Teresa Relford, 716 Westland Drive, and I'm sure you've all thought of these things I'm going to bring up, and please stop me if you have. I am a little bit concerned about the community council and the mention of powers, and also the relationship to incorporated homeowners groups. Now, have you all come to terms on the relationship of, say, a homeowners group within the community council as an incorporated group? Do we go and speak? I realize that we want to cooperate and work in the community in every means we have offered to it, but do we go to the community council, or can we speak as a body or a group in front of the various legislative bodies per se? What I would like to see, if you're going to keep the power, possible rights and powers granted to the community council, then would you be able to say the incorporated homeowners group shall be recognized as an existing corporate body as defined by its charter, and that this entity shall share in the rights and powers which may be provided by the legislative body? If you remove your powers part of the community council section, we would be happy still to work as we have been by a group speaking to the legislative bodies directly. But I don't really quite know where as homeowners we stand in the framework. And also, on your taxation, I would like very much to speak just a little bit about that. You speak in great detail of tax procedures and service areas, and you have taken what is existing and brought it down, it seems like more or less intact. What I had hoped very much, and I'm afraid you aren't going to be able to do, is to make in the charter a broader basis available. Now, I realize you say that no sales tax can be passed without certain qualification, but I would like to see as part of the charter a better balance in taxation, whether it be a broader tax base through sales tax, or whether you recognize the need for per capita and a usage base, as well as the property taxation base. But I do not think Anchorage can continue on the basis of taxation that we have been, particularly since we are in such a tremendous impact situation now. And to have such temporary help demanding such more or less very taxing permanent facilities, and we still have the military, which is likewise causing great impact, which I don't think is really equalized in their impact funds. And I would like very much if you could possibly put, say, where you have assessment districts in section 1104A, an assessment district insert based on property values and per capita usage. In other words, if you could just please sneak in without settling or too much controversy, a widening of your tax concept, or shrinking down your specific procedures that you have, in other words, make it less specific, so that in hopes when we start bringing back the various ways that it's going to be done, perhaps they will then bring in a better, broader base. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the Commission?
Perhaps we could explain one thing. My concept of it, the Commission may differ with me on this, my concept of it is that your homeowners group could become the community council. itself. And it wouldn't have to be responsible to anyone per se, so that might be better. I think we kind of agree.
Clarification, if you follow the ordinances presently within the borough, there would be a slight change that if the same people would become the community council, that's true, but they would lose the idea of raising money to pay for legal fees and that kind of thing. There's a specific thing in the ordinance, the present ordinance within the borough, speaking to having money and so forth.
So change that concept to
right, yeah, a little bit. It'd be the same people, and the whole idea behind it, council concept, is to give people a legal entity to speak to it, different boards and commissions and assembly. And this is done now. And I think that they can work compatibly very easily.
Fine, but it didn't seem to indicate it in the charter.
Pretty loose.
Thank you.
Deliberate.
Are there any other questions from the commission? Thank you, Mr. Burrell, for being here. Is there anyone you care to be heard?
Getting very late, I'll be quick. My name is Nancy Bradford, and I'd just like to say that I support everything that Mr. Carl Woodson has said this evening, and I'd like to strongly urge you to rewrite your multi-member district into one single member district.
Thank you very much. Mr. Parker?
Did you favor at-large or individual single?
Is there anyone else who would like to be heard? Yes, sir.
I'm Warren Moore, 3220 Project Road, and I just want to commend you to this charter for that's a lot of work. I'm in favor of the council assembly manager form of government with the mayor elected at large to serve as assembly. I think if we elect the mayor every 3 years, who has the right to appoint a manager, a big part of this time is going to be taken up in politics. This government has no way of being nearly as effective as one which has a professional manager appointed by the assembly who can continue on without being disrupted by the election reappointment. Also, I think this would eliminate the need for an ombudsman, which is, as I see it, is no expense. This charter is designed to reduce the cost of however government while at the same time maintaining responsiveness. Others have been in favor of deleting reference to the community council
in favor of deleting one.
That, and also the planning, comprehensive plan and planning commission. Let's see if these can be established and resolved according to which this also would apply to the Equal Rights Commission. Favor not taking out special commissions to have over us anymore. I'm in favor of the multi-member district. I too believe it's more responsible. Consideration should be given to selling the utilities. Must be a big issue as to how they're managed. If there are some buyers and recoup that investment,
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Are there any questions for Mr. Moore from the commission? Not. Thank you for being here and for expressing your opinion. Is there anyone else who would like to be heard?
Just briefly, my name is Roy Fields, and I'm with the Taxpayer Defense Association. I spoke to you briefly down at Chilliwack the other night and handed you a rather bulky list of comments and views of the Taxpayer Defense Association on the budget. Realizing that you wouldn't have time to look at them at that time, I did say that I would come back at a later date to respond to any questions anybody might have on that, and that's really my purpose here tonight.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be frank. I haven't found any time to look at it.
I'd like to respond to a lot of that with you personally later on. I have gone through it somewhat, but I have some more comments on it.
All right. There was one question I had, and that occurred at the time. I didn't ask you the chair position. It's difficult to, but it was on your questions about the limiting or emasculating initiative and referendum by taking mill levy and bonds and finance out of it.
Everything is concerned with finance, yes.
Do you really feel that it would be would make for a viable government, a government that could function if after the fact of a levy or something, they could destroy that levy? It would, in my estimation, is you'd ruin all the planning and you ruin your bonding capacity. And I just wonder if you really thought down to the end result of what would happen if a thing were recalled or
Mr. Chairman, we're getting into a little philosophical difference between you and me here. Some of the things that you're mentioning here don't really seem such great bugaboos to me, but I will try to respond on a different level of this thing. The point was made the other night that if, for example, we could go to the board with a referendum against the borough budget, which was just passed, and of course the mere collection of a few signatures to get the referendum on the ballot would then freeze that ordinance. No, I don't think that sort of thing should be done, and I do not think that that's responsible. I misunderstood the comments that was made that night. Somebody said that a successful referendum could put the government out of business, and I responded that if a successful referendum could be maintained, put them out of business, and they should be out of business. But I do think that by initiative, people should be able to pass laws relating to finance. I don't say that we should be able to come in and by initiative defeat a bond proposal which has already been accepted by the people. The bonds have been sold. I don't think that, as I mentioned a moment ago, that we should be able to come in and defeat a budget which has been already passed after public hearings and so forth. But I do think that we should be able to pass legislation by initiative which concern what matters of finance. I think that by initiative, the people should be able to pass any sort of legislation that the Assembly can initiate. I don't know if you've ever been involved with an initiative program, but it is a cumbersome, very difficult thing, even at a local level, like at our borough level. It's difficult to go out and get enough signatures to get an initiative on the ballot, and then to go out and get enough people to vote in favor of this thing. It isn't an easy thing, and there aren't very many things that people will feel strongly enough about to exercise the initiative. Probably one is finance, and this is the very point where we are barred from taking this action.
I think I understand your position. I did not understand it at all before. I thought it was an irresponsible position, and I couldn't reconcile it. I think I can reconcile what you're saying now.
I'm very happy to see, for example, that you do make provision for amendment of this charter by initiative, which has been ruled by the state Supreme Court to be unconstitutional at the state level. You cannot amend the state constitution by initiative. And I'm very happy to see that you provided this in the charter.
Ms. Parker?
I had a question. In Article 11, you feel that no new tax ordinance should be valid unless ratified by the people, the majority. And then with 1102, you say that this section allows for the municipality to really sucker people on property taxes, and that there should be another way for means of raising revenues. And I'm wondering that if you feel that a sales tax, if a sales tax was imposed, if this would help to keep property tax at a minimum.
Oh, I think this is probably a desirable alternative. I don't really object to property taxes. I think there should be a limit on property taxes. But I think that rather than being permanently emblazoned in the charter as the way of raising money, I think the means should be left open for exploring other alternatives, and I think the sales tax is an alternative. The only thing that really concerns me about this is that I've lived in a lot of different places, and I've seen sales tax ordinances get enacted, and I have never yet seen property taxes go down as a result of sales tax coming in.
It's discouraging.
It's discouraging. I'd like to see that sometimes, but I've never seen it. But yes, I think that we should explore other alternatives, but any alternative tax measure we come up with, any other type of tax, still should be approved by the voters.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fields. Are there other questions, Mr. Field? No, Mr.
Well, I'd like to thank you for clarifying your position on that too. I know I did.
Appreciate the comments.
Are there any others in the audience who have not been heard, who wish to be heard? Are there any who have been heard before who would like to be heard again? Mr. Pack?
I'd like to discuss one subject that I think is a fair solution to it. That's the sewer service charge. Now, the cost of that plant out there, which was imposed on us by the federal government, had to be done by 72, has been an awfully expensive thing. And I believe if they would put the actual cost of that spread over the assessment on a tax levy for just that separately, then put in your general budget the rest of your plumbing expense that isn't on somebody's specific property, and give them assessments on that, you'd be over the hill on it. You'd have it whipped. I don't believe that they're going to whip it the way it's going, putting it all on a sewer service charge where you don't know how much is going towards the plant, and you don't know how much is going to the laterals, and you don't know what's going in some of the improvement costs of operating the
the service department of the borough. I believe that would solve it. You can put it in the charter as an administrative matter. But advisory, I'd say that it would solve that problem. I don't know how you're going to solve it any other way, because that's a lot of your deficiency of properties where that account is way behind, and you've got to make it up when you pay your costs of those bonds. And that department, I think, is running way behind all the time.
Any questions of Mr. Peck? Sure. Any suggestions? Not? Thank you. Did you wish to be heard?
Very short.
Yeah.
My name is Joe Bavra. I live at 69 Prosperity Drive. I would like to put on record as an interested listener, and also as a taxpayer and member of this community, that I'm supporting Carl Woodson's testimony. Also the testimony, a statement by the former member from the Tax Defense Association about the limiting factor on property taxes equal to sales tax. In other words, I'm saying we have a sales tax. I'd like to see something limiting property tax increases or diminishing that. I think that would be very appropriate and very helpful for real estate owners. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's a neat street to live on, Prosperity.
Prosperity Street?
Yeah, I hope they have it.
Yes, ma'am.
Why didn't they, like they do in other places, they have these sewer systems, they make money off of it instead of people paying so much out of it. They use the gas off of it and your organic stuff. They ship even some of it up here for fertilizer. They sell it. It comes up here in bags. We buy it. Now, why couldn't we do the same thing as they have here with a high rate?
Well, the city of Milwaukee's been doing this for 30 years.
And they're coming out ahead of it. And here, what do we have? We have nothing except higher and higher sewer rates.
I think that from a charter standpoint, we wouldn't be able to address it other than to allow the administrative government authority to do such things, and I think we do allow it in the.
Can't we sell it to a private organization? They could probably do it.
A lot of it being sold.
Anybody want to buy our sewer system?
Frank Lemon? A lot of it being sold in Anchorage right now.
I hope we sell it.
Is there anyone else here who would like to be heard?
Very good question. Who wrote what's in the charter? Who wrote it? Did Mr. Garrett write it, or did one of you?
Rick Garnett and us, and the commission.
Oh, it's very much a.
It's a mixed bag. It's a composite thing.
In terms of reviewing it compared to the other charters, and I worked quite a bit on the other ones, both of them. This is please don't change the wording you use. Just revise what needs to be revised.
Just change the substance, but leave it.
Just start all over again, blank page, and solve everything that's been brought up tonight, right?
Mrs. Dittman, I would like to address your question a little bit, give a little bit of credit here. We formed a charter production committee, which was a complete body, but was headed by Sherry Holmes. And Sherry has a long whip, and she kept us working. And I want to credit her for getting as far as we have gotten today. She has worked very hard, and I think no member of the commission would deny that if she hadn't done as much as she had done, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Agree. You have been sure if you didn't have a good whip too.
No whip. If there's no one else to be heard, we'll stand adjourned. Name, address, and phone number so I can get in contact with them.
Do you have any?
What happened to the interviews today?
The interview today was on PR. No other secretary.
Oh, I thought somebody had a second.
I thought there was one coming in.
Yeah, well, that
Do we have someone in mind?
we have one application with resume that we get into the things that
But we need more names if you have any.
Well, how about, is Bev Edison interested?
No.
No.
She's with Omar and overbooked, and be glad to wrap with us a solution to it. I talked to her several times.
What about controversial?
I have another problem.
Huh? Oh, she wants to vote.